What's up, guys? It's Lord Both here for another video, and the gaslighting from games industry CEOs is just off the charts these days, as we have even more of them coming out and basically saying, stop being poor. Now, first up is Borderlands. Now, Borderlands is supposed to have a game that comes out later this year, and it looked like it had a lot of things going for it. Particularly because their trailers actually looked decent, and they were cut a big break by GTA moving their release until next year, and Marathon essentially doing everything wrong when it comes to marketing, and looking absolutely terrible in everything we've seen of it. But just like many companies in the gaming industry, Gearbox found a way to snatch defeat from the jaws of victory. Because this person here on X Twitter replied to a post about Borderlands, stating Randy, that's Randy Pitchford, who's the CEO of Gearbox that makes Borderlands, right? He states, Randy, this game better not be $80. Don't take that risk. A lot of gamers aren't going to pay $80 and feed this notion of constant increase of price tag. You are the CEO. You have some say with the price when it comes to your publisher. Seems like a fairly tame statement. It's just a guy saying, hey, come on, man. Don't make this game $80. Actually be, pro-consumer, not charge as much. There's some companies that are already on this trend and taking the smart way out. Noticing the success that, again, Claire Obscure is having at $50. That Bethesda had with $50 of the release of their remaster of Oblivion. Even companies like EA saying, hey, we're not going to change the price of our games anytime soon. And this guy is just saying, hey, don't increase your price on this game. It seems like it's worth not $80, so there's no reason to bump it up to $80. Seems like a fairly reasonable request for just a random person on Twitter to make. And Randy could have said nothing. Always keep in mind, he could have said nothing, but he decides to respond. Randy Pitchford, the CEO of Gearbox, responds to this guy by saying, hey, not my call.
I missed the part where that's my problem.
Again, the guy in his response in the Twitter thread, he was saying, hey, you're the CEO. You just have some weight when it comes to the pricing with your publisher. Can't you use some of that at least and get him down to $70 maybe? Don't increase it to $80 at least. And he's out here being like, oh, it's not my call, bro. Well, congratulations. You just announced that you're a complete to your actual publisher. And you're not really a CEO. You're basically just a manager. Some would argue you're not even that. They'd argue that you're a stupid visor. And the publisher has absolute say when it comes to everything. Though when it comes to gaming developers and publishers, it's kind of felt that way for a while now. I mean, it's especially true of PlayStation and their developers. That was made quite apparent in the whole Arrowhead and the PSN debacle that came about with Helldivers 2. And that would have been bad, but Randy didn't stop there. He went on to say, B, if you're a real fan, already a bad way to start, you'll find a way to make it happen.
Did you guys not have phones?
Yeah, you guys all have.
Boy, that escalated quickly.
So what he just said right there was that if you don't buy this game or find some way to buy this game, you're not a real fan of the series. Imagine the CEO of any other business saying this. Imagine the owner of your local bar or restaurant taking an ad out in the newspaper and saying this, or going on Facebook and saying this on their official restaurant page or something. You would be perceived as a complete idiot and a jerk. And it gets worse because he goes on to say, my local game store had Starflight for the Sega Genesis for $80 in 1991. When I was just out of high school working minimum wage at an ice cream parlor in Pismo Beach, and I found a way to make it happen.
If you're poor, stop being poor.
Yes. Yes, ladies and gentlemen, we finally reached it. We've made fun of boomers for so long using that phrase of, well, back in my day. when now Gen Xers have become the loudest, most prominent people using that kind of whataboutism. Back in my day, a Sega Genesis game was $80, and I just worked at the local ice cream parlor, making minimum wage, and I used to walk through the snow that was 10 feet high, back and forth, both ways, 3 miles each, in 10-foot snow. I tell you something, you kids just don't understand how good you have it these days. Listen, I don't want to be told how pricey games were 30 years ago, because it's the same arguments that were being used when Nintendo decided to raise their prices on everything just a few months ago that started this whole debate, right? And started this whole movement on games having their prices increased and consoles having their prices increased, because people were making this same argument then. So I'll make the same counter arguments as I did then, which is A, the economy has changed. Yes, games started to sell for quite a bit less, and people got used to that. And you can't just up the game prices continuously with no end in sight after people have gotten used to cheap games, especially on console, which is supposed to be a cheap alternative to PC gaming, which is supposed to be the expensive model, right? Secondly, yes, games cost more in the early 90s, late 80s, because the micro technology wasn't quite there yet. It was a lot harder to make actual physical cartridges, which, by the way, you actually owned the physical cartridges of the game and not just digital licensed copies like you do today. And you were selling to a lot smaller audience because, yes, the gaming audience, the amount of gamers in the world, was quite a bit less in 1991 than it is in 2025. Also, we're pretending the fact that the CD-ROM didn't come about, which made it very, very easy to put video games onto that cheap device and then use it as a way to sell video games. And now we've even upgraded to digital, which again brings about the problem of the fact that you don't actually own your game. You own a digital license to a game that they can apparently take away anytime they want. But it also means that access to that game should be cheaper in theory, because there's no actual physical game being made. You don't have to put it on a CD-ROM, which means you don't have to physically buy CD-ROMs, which should make it cheaper. And putting it on a CD-ROM was already cheaper than old-style cartridges. So in theory, gaming should be as cheap as it's ever been. And yet the prices continue to raise. And it's just all incredibly wild that his argument is all based upon the fact that, oh, I have no power with my publisher to actually change the game prices, even though I'm CEO of the company that actually made the game. And his other argument in this is that, well, if you're a real fan, you'll buy it and stop being poor, because I used to be poor and games were more expensive back then, no matter what the reasons. We're just going to ignore that. And I found a way to do it, so you do it. Stop being poor.
Like, if you're a broke boy, just say so.
But he's not the only one making a complete ass of himself when it comes to video game pricing. We also have this right here from the International Business Times of the UK, entitled, "As Game Prices Climb to £100, Sony legend says stop complaining. It's worth it." And the person they're talking about is Shuei Yoshida, who was an executive for Sony for a very long time until his retirement this year, in which he stated in an interview with Critical Hits, quote, "I don't believe every game has to be priced the same. Each game provides a different value or size of budget. I totally believe it's up to the publishers or developers' self-publishing decision to price their product to the value they believe they are bringing in. Yes, it's the old Adam Sessler argument. Skyrim should be $100 because I'm putting 100 hours worth of playtime into it. How stupid is that?" He goes on to state, in terms of actual price of $70 or $80 for really great games, I think it will still be a steal in terms of the amount of entertainment that top games, top quality games, bring to people compared to other forms of entertainment.
You're not just wrong, You're stupid.
As long as people choose carefully how to spend their money, I don't think they should be complaining about it. Yes, again, stop being poor. That's what every argument they use comes down to, essentially. And in terms of the $70 to $80 for top entertainment, top quality games, yeah, I would argue that Claire Obscure Expedition 33, a game that was made by 30 people in the middle of France who just seem to, like and actually play video games, doesn't seem like it's poor quality in any way. And it sold for $50 a pop. And it's doing quite well. Also, again, the Oblivion remaster, which I've said before is basically a remake, because a company took Bethesda's game, remade it from the ground up on a different engine with massive upgrades in appearance, and that sold for $50 a pop, and it did really well. I wouldn't call that low quality either. By the way, it also introduced a whole new generation of fans to not just Oblivion, but Bethesda. Because let's be honest, the one game from Bethesda, in terms of at least Elder Scrolls, that most Gen Zers and especially Gen A has played is Skyrim. And that came out when I was in my early years of high school. And I'm in my 30s now. I'm considered an old man of the gaming world. These guys, they just don't get it, man. They don't understand that it has very little to do with people being poor, with them not having money for this hobby. It has everything to do with the fact that this seems to be an industry that is obsessed with having more and more and more, higher profits, exponential growth constantly. And in that pursuit, they are literally squeezing the general audience out of this hobby. And as I've said in numerous videos, you don't live off of the hardcore fans. You don't live off of the high-enders who have the highest level of equipment and spend top dollar on everything. You live off of the normies, the affordables. As I've said countless times before, in the restaurant business, it's well known you don't make your money off the regulars. They're gonna come in, they're gonna spend their money because they know they're gonna get the one item that they like and they're gonna live by that. What you make your actual money off of, what you actually live off of, is the non-regulars, the normies in terms of the movie business, the casual gamers in terms of the gaming industry. And when it comes to the casual gamers, they're not going to turn around and spend $80 on every blockbuster game that's supposed to come out. They're going to start picking and choosing. And when they start picking and choosing, you're going to see a lot of these big name brands and developers start to crumble. And you've already started to see that. And this is just going to accelerate that process. And what's going to happen is that the cheaper indie scene is going to take over like it's already begun. Eventually, I think these publishers will realize this. They will reinvest in that sort of cheaper model of gaming and understand that not everybody can afford high-end, massive, bloated games where they have uncontrollable budgets, because that's another big factor in this, is that these gaming developers and publishers don't know how to actually control their budgets. But I think at a certain point, it will come down to the fact that they have to realize that that is the problem, and it's not, the children that are the problem, and actually fix it, or they're just going to have to find a different kind of business model, because this is not going to work out for them in the future. But those are just my thoughts on all this. If you have your own thoughts, go and leave them in the comments. If you like this video, go and like, share, and subscribe. If you didn't like this video, appreciate you watching all of it, and we'll talk to you again later.